Let me start by making a confession. And this is that at various stages of my life, I was quite oblivious to gender-specific patterns that were going on around me. Patterns that were discernible in people's access to education, access to finance, access to healthcare, control of assets. I never really thought about science and technology as a field dominated by men until my first day in engineering school as an undergraduate. Because you see, growing up in Nigeria, in secondary school, science and math classes were equally populated with boys and girls, and the girls did just as well or even better than the boys. And we had male and female science and math teachers in equal proportion. So there I was in the early 80s in engineering school, one of a handful of girls, and only one of about 5 girls that graduated in a class of about 100 students. I never really considered or looked at my progress from a gender-specific lens. And that is because I had the freedom to go to school. I had the freedom to choose what I wanted to study, and to a certain extent, where I wanted to study. And to a certain extent, where I wanted to study. And this freedom followed me into my career, when I started my career. I had what I would call a fairly smooth career. There were no overt incidences of discrimination. I worked in a firm where we, as opposed to referring to ourselves in gender-specific terms, we proudly called ourselves androids, as gender-neutral a term as you can imagine. But 15 years later, as a female senior executive in this firm that was populated with androids, I looked around me, and again, I was in the minority. But I was not alone in this female-free environment. There were many other women, senior executives, also operating and experiencing this female-free environment. So together with 12 other women and 1 man, we established a non-governmental organization called Women in Management and Business. And our mission was to be the catalyst that elevated the profile and influence of women in management and business. And we have since extended that to include public service. So there I was, admittedly more gender conscious, doing my little bit to improve the visible gender patterns in corporate Nigeria. And then I got the proverbial tap on the shoulder to join the Nigerian government. And this tap on the shoulder was to join in the capacity of Minister of Communication Technology with a mandate to a brand new portfolio. And our mandate was to leverage information and communication technologies for national development. So here I stand before you, a woman, a Minister of Communication Technology, a male-dominated field, superintending a key sector in Africa's largest economy. And it is from this vantage point that I want to speak to you today about how information and communication technologies can have a transformative impact on gender imbalances, and to consider how the greatest technological innovation of the 21st century could help to redress some age-old prejudices that have contributed to marginalizing almost half of humanity. Information and communication technologies has helped us to make tremendous progress, especially in emerging economies, in the areas of health, education, agriculture. And they've had a positive impact on some of the more vulnerable groups of our society, women and girls, in the context of this particular talk. Take, for example, Ondo State, a state in southwestern Nigeria, who had the highest maternal mortality in that region, and who within 3 years has halved that maternal mortality through an innovative program called Abiye. Abiye is a Yoruba word, and it has 2 literal translations. It means to give birth to life, referring to the child. It also means to give birth and live, referring to the mother. And through the distribution of mobile phones to pregnant women and healthcare workers, to facilitate communication throughout the pregnancy, and the use of those mobile phones to deliver conditional cash transfers to these women, Ondo State was able to achieve the tremendous progress that I've talked about. We can also look at the example of the Millennium Development Goals as they relate to universal primary education. Nigeria is on track, we're about 80% now, to meet the 3 goals of gross enrollment, net enrollment, and universal primary education. Importantly, we are also on track to meet the goals of gender parity. And so today, for every 10 boys registered in primary and secondary school, we have 9 girls registered. Information and communication technologies are also helping us to achieve more educational goals on a broader basis through the provision of content on mobile phones and the internet, and making that content accessible to women and girls who, for whatever reason, were excluded from the formal education system. We're giving these people a second chance where they thought they had none. My work at WIMBIZ resonates with achievements all over the world. And we see an increasing, albeit slowly, female representation on boards, in senior executive positions in corporate organizations, in business, in public office, in political office. And I'm glad to tell you that there are at least a dozen other female ministers of ICTs in different parts of the world. In 2012, my daughter graduated with a degree in engineering from my alma mater, incidentally, and she looks a lot less geeky than I did when I graduated. But whereas I was one of 5 girls in my graduating class, almost 30 years later, she was one in a class of only 10 in her graduating class of a similar number, about 100 students. So we're shifting the dial, and ICTs are helping us to shift that dial. But it looks as though we're playing a numbers game. We're hitting indicators, we're ticking off targets. And I would like us to just pause for a minute and consider that when we report progress on maternal mortality, do we consider the age of the mother, or how often she's given birth, and whether or not the frequency of that childbirth is being motivated by cultural need to give birth to a son to prove that she's a real wife? Because you see, for some, the girl child is good, but the boy child is a must. We acknowledge, and it is good for us to celebrate the fact that more than ever before, the probability of a girl child achieving something academically significant is higher today. But we must also just consider for a minute that when she comes back from school and changes out of her school uniform, what does she change into? I was a consultant before I became a minister, and I was used to measuring success based on the achievement of key performance indicators. Very comfortable with this. But during my 3.5-year tenure as a Minister of Communication Technology, I have had cause to wonder whether the achievement of these KPIs are not clouding our vision. Because despite the achievement of these KPIs, women are still being murdered and raped for exercising their choices. They are still being routinely abducted in conflict situations. And they're also being sexually harassed to, from, and at work. So although we are making progress, and it really is quite odd because it seems as though this has become, in some minds, it has become an accepted occurrence. And although we're making progress on some really important issues concerning gender imbalance, we're not really addressing the underlying root cause of this problem. And these are age-old, deeply ingrained cultural mindsets. We need to do better, and we need to do more. With the increasing pervasiveness of the mobile phone, it really is only a matter of time before all 7.2 billion of us on this earth are all connected. And when that happens, it will be the first time in the history of mankind. What will we do with this? This connectedness is a sum of new opportunities to pool expertise together. It provides us with platforms to share information across countries, across cultures, across geographies. It gives us the analytical power to look at this information and begin to see how these cultural mindsets have come to be. And it may then be that it will give us an increasing understanding of why we are achieving these key performance indicators, but we are not shifting cultural mindsets. We need to redefine what we mean by success. The KPIs, the key performance indicators that we use today to measure our progress, are not only static, they're quite restrictive. And when we measure our progress against them, we don't get the whole picture, we don't tell the whole story. Our connectedness will lead us to developing more holistic key performance indicators. And when we measure our progress against them, we can measure not only the form of that progress, but the substance of that progress. As a Minister of Communication Technology, in a country where we are making strong economic advancement, but yet we are challenged on a number of national development indicators, I have seen the transformative power of information and communication technologies when they are applied to address or achieve specific goals. Information, key performance indicators are not enough. The individual use of information and communication technologies are also not enough. Our path to a more equal world will come about when we use our many-to-many connectedness to bring together, that the ICTs allow us to bring together the key performance indicators and the information and communication technologies. Thank you.